Hey guys, tonight we begin with something ancient, dusty, and absolutely drenched in heroic sweat. You're waking up in Sparta. But don't stretch just yet, your bed is a wooden board. There's no mattress, no pillow. Your blanket is a scratchy wool shroud that smells faintly of old vinegar and last week's goat. It's morning technically, though the Spartan sun hasn't quite lit the stone walls of your barracks. Not that it matters, your training master has already clanged a bronze pot near your head and yelled something about discipline and fortitude. Welcome to the most sleep-deprived society of the ancient world. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to see where bedtime brings us together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs over the edge of the cot and brace yourself. Your knees crack like old wagon wheels, though you're only 13. Or maybe 20? No one's really counting birthdays in Sparta, they count bruises. Around you, other boys stir in the pre-dawn dark, their skin marked with training scars and the occasional scarab tattooed for good luck. Outside, the air smells like olive groves and somebody cooking porridge that no one will enjoy. Breakfast. That's optional. You're not hungry anyway. Hunger is for Athenians and philosophers. You step outside into the training yard where the stones are cold and your sandals barely hold together. A raven cackles somewhere overhead, probably amused at what's about to happen to your pride. And then you see him, Leonidas. He doesn't look like a king. He looks like a mountain grew a beard and decided to frown forever. His chest is bare, except for a blood-red cloak fluttering in the wind, and his gaze is that of a man who's seen too many battles and not enough jokes. He doesn't speak yet. He just looks over you and the rest of your cohort like your produce at the agora, acceptable, but not quite ripe. This is Sparta, and you're expected to be hard enough to break stone with your teeth and humble enough to say thank you afterward. You're not just part of a city. You are the city. Each breath you take is supposed to strengthen the walls of Sparta and its reputation across the Peloponnesus. Historians still argue whether the Spartan way of life was truly as harsh as described or somewhat mythologized later by admiring or horrified writers. But here now, in this imagined moment of dawn rituals and spear drills, it's clear you're not meant to thrive. You're meant to endure. As the morning advances, the drills begin. First, a run, no armor, no shoes. Just feet pounding over hard-packed clay and sharp stones that seem to rise on purpose just to catch your toes. Then it's wrestling in sand pits, biting dust, while your opponent tries to break your grip with a knee to your ribs. Cheering isn't allowed. Only grunts, bruises, and the occasional sarcastic remark about your opponent fighting like a Corinthian baker and Leonidas. He watches, occasionally corrects a stance. Once he even nods. That's basically a standing ovation in Spartan terms. Now here's something you didn't expect. Mid-training, a priest appears anointing Leonidas's forehead with oil. He mutters something about omens, birds, and the entrails of a goat that apparently predicts mild success for the week. You raise an eyebrow, but remember that in ancient Greece, military planning often involved disemboweled animals and mysterious nods. By late morning, you're aching dirty and convinced your left shoulder no longer belongs to your body. Still, no one quits. Quitting is not only frowned upon, it's punishable. One lad once asked to skip spear practice for a sore foot and ended up digging latrines for 3 weeks. The foot healed. The dignity did not. You break for water near the edge of the training grounds, where statues of past warriors loom stone faces etched with ancient smirks, as if they too remember the taste of dirt and humiliation. One of them is rumored to be Leonidas's older brother Cleomenes, who drank a bit too much and died mysteriously after a political dispute. The official story, he offended the gods. The real story, Spartan politics, was less about debate and more about who could glare the longest without blinking. And here you are glaring at the sun arms sore from endless shield drills and trying not to yawn in front of your commander. Because in Sparta, yawning is seen as weak. Or worse, Athenian. The day draws on. You spar sweat, eat a handful of barley, and maybe a fig if you're lucky, and march in formation until your thighs feel like overcooked lamb. And still you keep going. Because here's the truth. No one tells you in the storybooks Sparta doesn't create warriors overnight. It molds them slowly with pressure repetition and exactly zero sympathy. There are no participation trophies, no bathhouses with lavender soap, and definitely no toga parties. Just grit discipline and the looming knowledge that at any moment the Persians could return. And that's why Leonidas matters. He wasn't born a king. He wasn't raised to rule. He was the second son, maybe even the third. Historians still argue about the exact order. But somehow, he ended up wearing the red cloak and leading Sparta not just with strategy, but with silence. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened, and sometimes panicked. As the sun finally dips low over the hills, painting everything bronze and burnt orange, you finally get to sit. Sort of. You perch on a rock and chew your final meal of the day, something that tastes like overcooked oatmeal and regret. And you glance across the courtyard, where Leonidas stands alone watching the horizon like he already knows what's coming. The Persians are coming, and whether you're ready or not, you'll be beside him at the hot gates. You don't remember exactly when your training became your life. One day you were a boy sneaking olives, and the next, you're dodging wooden spears thrown with enough force to knock out your remaining baby teeth. That's the Agoge Sparta's unique educational system. And by educational, of course, we mean a soul-grinding boot camp designed to replace all softness in your body with calluses and all curiosity with blind endurance. At age 7, your mother kissed your forehead twice, which meant she really did like you, and sent you off to the communal barracks. From that moment on, you belonged more to Sparta than to your own family. Your teachers were old warriors who smelled like leather and salt, and whose main tools were sticks and shame. Your first lesson: survive. Your second lesson: steal, but don't get caught. The third: if caught, make the punishment a learning experience. There's an infamous story of a Spartan boy who hid a fox under his tunic during a theft, let it gnaw through his stomach, rather than reveal the theft, and died quietly in class. Historians still argue whether this tale was a literal account or a moral parable with fox-shaped embellishments. Either way, it was considered admirable. You recall your own cheese-stealing escapade, a rite of passage in which you and other wide-eyed trainees had to snatch cheese from an altar, while older teens stood guard with whips. They enjoyed that part, and their aim was disturbingly accurate. You got the cheese. And 12 lashes. You were proud of both. But the agage isn't all physical. There's a special kind of mental warfare at play. Sarcasm is an art form here, as important as swordplay. A true Spartan warrior doesn't just endure pain, he delivers one-liners while doing it. And not the loud kind. Dry, understated, the kind of jokes you whisper while dodging arrows or say preparing to fight a numerically superior invading force. Think of it as stand-up comedy, but with more spears and slightly less laughter. Education here includes singing oddly enough, though it's less about pitch and more about projecting your voice across a battlefield. You memorize old war songs about heroes who died gloriously and didn't complain once, not even when their legs were on fire. You also learn poetry. But don't get excited. These aren't romantic verses. They're hymns to the state. You chant odes to discipline obedience and how to march in time without stepping on the guy's heel in front of you. And let's talk about food, because Spartan cuisine has exactly two flavor profiles, bland and blander. You eat the infamous black broth, made from boiled pig's blood salt and vinegar. One visiting foreigner supposedly gagged after a single sip and asked, "Do Spartans fight so bravely because death is the only way to escape their meals?" A fair question. Honestly, the pottage you had back in Section 1 feels like haute cuisine in comparison. Bathing happens, but not often. And forget about oils, perfumes, or any of that Athenian nonsense. You're allowed to wash off in cold river water now and then. Mostly to keep the lice population at a manageable level. You begin to forget what smelling nice ever felt like. You suspect even the goats avoid you. You carry your shield everywhere on marches, to meals, even to bed sometimes. It's not just a piece of equipment. It's identity, family, and philosophy, all molded into a bronze oval. The phrase every mother says to her son as he heads to war is burned into your brain. Come back with your shield, or on it, which is just Spartan for don't mess this up. You also carry a short sword, a xiphus, but that's more for show. Real Spartans use spears. Long leaf-bladed and deadly efficient. You drill for hours each day, perfecting the phalanx, the tight infantry formation where shields overlap and everyone becomes one impenetrable wall of muscle sweat and low expectations. Now there's something oddly modern about all this. Your squad, your enemodia, is your second family. You eat together, train together, sleep side by side on straw-stuffed mats that smell like mildew and ambition. If someone messes up in battle, it reflects on all of you. It's a system built not on personal glory, but collective survival. There's no such thing as a lone Spartan hero, except when there is. And Leonidas, he's the contradiction. He trains like you, marches like you, even jokes like you, though sparingly. But he carries something different in his silence, something ancient. He's not trying to be remembered. He's trying to be useful. And yet, as you watch him one night, sharpening his sword under the pale moonlight, you wonder, does he ever doubt? Historians still argue whether Spartans were truly fearless or just trained to suppress fear with enough social pressure and salty stew. But in this quiet moment, watching Leonidas methodically prepare for war, you sense no fear, just certainty. A kind of resigned confidence in the role he must play. That role becomes clearer with each passing day. Scouts bring whispers of a Persian advance. Merchants report strange ships landing far to the north. And the helots, the enslaved agricultural workers who keep Sparta's economy running, are more anxious than usual. Something's coming, and everyone knows it. When word arrives of King Xerxes crossing the Hellespont with an army so vast it supposedly drinks rivers dry, no one panics. Instead, there's a kind of quiet sharpening across the city. Blades, spears, focus. There's no rallying speech, no stirring public announcement. You just find your sandals waiting at the foot of your bed one morning, perfectly repaired. That's how Spartans say it's time. Leonidas doesn't ask for volunteers. He chooses them. 300 men, all with sons to carry on their names, because this isn't a rescue mission, it's a delay tactic. A beautiful doomed gesture that will give the Greek city-states time to prepare. Your name is called. You don't react. Just nod, grip your shield, and start packing. You wrap your sandals tightly. Tuck a sprig of wild thyme into your belt for luck. Whisper a goodbye to the stone carving of your ancestor at the training yard. The march begins at dawn, and you realize somewhere deep in your chest that everything the Agog put you through, all the pain, hunger, and humorless discipline, was to prepare you for this. The hot gates await. The march to Thermopylae doesn't begin with a roar. It begins with dust clouds of it kicking up under 300 pairs of disciplined, sandaled feet. You shift your shield slightly to ease the weight on your shoulder. It's not heavy at first, but after an hour or two, it starts to feel like you're hauling a bronze door uphill for fun. Leonidas is at the front. Of course he is. You've yet to see him take a break, cough, or even sneeze. He walks with the same steady rhythm he trains with, like every step is planned and part of some ancient battle choreography. Behind you, the other chosen Spartans march in near silence. No jokes, no songs. Just the occasional grunt and the soft clatter of spear tips brushing shields. The air tastes of heat and olive trees, and you can hear the chirping of cicadas in the distant hills. This is central Greece, rocky dry and indifferent to your blisters. Still, there's something almost sacred about this road. You're not just going to a fight. You're walking into legend. The others know it too. You can feel it in the way they check their armor straps a little tighter and glance up at the sun like they're memorizing its color. By midday, you pass through a small village. The farmers don't cheer. They don't offer food or water. They just watch. Some nod. Some whisper. One old man bows slightly. That's the Spartan version of a hero's welcome. Your cloak flutters behind you, marking you as part of the king's guard. Blood red just like his. A shade chosen not for beauty, but because it hides bloodstains. Spartans ever practical and ever dramatic. You set up camp by a stream. No tents. Spartans don't do tents. You lay on your cloak, chew on dried figs, and stare at the stars. A younger soldier beside you mutters, "They say the Persian army is so big their arrows block out the sun." You reply without thinking, "Good. Then we'll fight in the shade." The words aren't yours originally. You heard them once during training from a grizzled instructor with a lazy eye and zero patience. But tonight, they sound right. They stick in the air like a prophecy, and a few men chuckle quietly. Even Leonidas allows himself a half smile. It's the kind of joke Spartans specialize in, short, fatalistic, and so dry it could start a fire. Historians still argue whether the infamous fight in the shade quip was actually said, or whether it was another Herodotus embellishment, like the one about the fox and the gut chewing. Either way, it lives on because it feels true. And really, in the sleepy march toward impossible odds, feeling true matters more than being provably accurate. The next day, you reach the pass Thermopylae, the hot gates. The name comes from the sulfuric springs that bubble nearby, giving the place an oddly medicinal stink, like a battlefield being cleaned by rotten eggs. But the geography, that's what makes it legendary. The road here narrows to a tight corridor between the Aegean Sea on one side and steep wooded cliffs on the other. Only a few men can pass shoulder to shoulder, which is perfect. When you're outnumbered 100 to 1, you don't want open fields. You want a funnel, a meat grinder. And this pass, it's a gift from the gods, or at least a very convenient coincidence. You and your fellow Spartans begin preparing fortifications, not with walls or trenches, with positioning. You find the optimal point to form the phalanx, where your shields will link your spears, can thrust, and no horse or chariot can sneak through the gaps. Leonidas orders scouts to survey the terrain. One returns with a map sketched in charcoal on parchment that looks suspiciously like it was once part of someone's tunic. He outlines possible side paths. One in particular, a goat trail, gets a frown from the king. You'll remember that trail later. Everyone will. That evening, another Greek force arrives. Thespians, Thebans, and a scattering of others who've heard about Leonidas's mission and want to help. They're brave. A little loud. One of them brings wine. You don't trust him immediately, but the wine helps. Together, you make camp. It's not exactly cozy, but there's a strange camaraderie in the air. You're soldiers from rival cities, united by the knowledge that you're about to get thoroughly trampled. Nothing bonds people faster than mutual doom. And then, the Persians arrive, not all at once. First come the outriders like cavalry who scout and ride in lazy circles on the far side of the pass. Then the supply wagons. Then the infantry. Then more infantry. Then even more infantry. It feels like an optical illusion. Every time you blink, there are more men. Eventually, the golden parasol appears. That's how you know Xerxes has arrived. You squint. Can't see his face from here. But the tent he uses is large enough to house a dozen goats, 3 dancers, and probably a full buffet. Persian royalty doesn't do minimalism. One of the Persian envoys approaches under a white flag. He's tall, perfumed, and wearing enough jewelry to make a temple statue jealous. He delivers the message with a smirk. Lay down your weapons. Leonidas doesn't blink, doesn't twitch. He simply says, "Come and take them. Mullen Labe." The phrase travels faster than the scent of the sulfur springs. The envoy doesn't know whether to be insulted or impressed. He rides off. And that's that. There's no dramatic music, no swelling speeches. Just a few nods. The men return to their positions. You adjust your helmet, eat a dried fig, and try not to think about the number of soldiers Xerxes has. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter. Leonidas didn't bring you here to win. He brought you here to buy time. Time for Athens to prepare their navy. Time for Greek cities to set aside grudges. Time for a legend to begin, and you're part of that. A single shield in a wall of bronze. One voice in a soon-to-be silent chorus. The stars are out again. This time you don't look up. You just wait for morning. Morning comes not with a sunrise, but with a tremble in the earth like the land itself is bracing. You awaken to the rumble of thousands of boots marching on soft soil, the clinking of armor, the faint metallic whistle of banners unfurling. It's like some vast machine has been activated beyond the past one powered by ambition, empire, and sheer numbers. You rub your eyes, chew on a bit of stale barley bread, and stretch the stiffness from your limbs. Around you, the other Spartans move without comment. They rise, tighten their greaves, adjust their tunics. The only words exchanged are practical, your straps loose. Shift your grip. Check your left flank. Across the narrow battlefield, the Persian army readies itself too. Only their side looks more like a pageant than a war camp. Robes shimmer in the sun. Drummers beat steady rhythms. Cavalrymen polish their reins, while archers adjust quivers taller than most Spartan children. Somewhere a flute plays a lilting tune. It's surreal. Almost beautiful. You wonder how many languages are being spoken over there. Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, Scythians. Xerxes' empire stretches from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. You wouldn't be surprised if there were a few confused diplomats in the back, still asking for directions. Then the immortals arrive. Not actual immortals, of course. That's just their name, the king's elite guard, always numbering exactly 10,000. If one dies, he's immediately replaced like a hydra with paperwork. They're dressed in black robes and scaled armor that gleams like oil in the light. They march with quiet precision, their spears rising and falling in perfect rhythm. You watch them and think, ah, so that's the main course. Still, there's no fear in your gut? Not exactly. Maybe a little indigestion from the barley. But not fear. You've trained your entire life for this. Your muscles are muscle memory. Your mind is calm, your humor. Intact? Barely. One of your fellow Spartans mutters, "I hope they brought enough arrows to kill us and write their memoirs." You chuckle. Nervous, maybe. But it's also just another day of work only, with a higher chance of stabbing. Xerxes sends a second envoy, this one more dramatic. He comes alone bearing a scroll and an offer. Riches. Land. A place in the Persian aristocracy. All for surrender. Leonidas listens completely still. When the envoy finishes reading, there's a long pause. Then the king simply turns away. No speech, no threats. Just the silence of dismissal. The envoy leaves. You tighten your grip on your shield, and then it begins. Not with a trumpet or a war cry, but with a single unexpected sound. Footsteps, hundreds, thousands. A tidal wave of leather sandals pounding in unison. The first wave comes fast, Medes and Scythians mostly. Light infantry, probably testing the waters. You form the phalanx. Shields lock, spears rise. Your breath slows. Your legs bend slightly at the knee, steady and springy. And when the enemy hits, it feels less like a clash and more like a pressure system slamming into a cliff face. You hold. They push. You push back. Their spears are longer but not as strong. Their armor shinier but not as practical. And they don't have the discipline. They scatter when one of their front ranks is felled by a Spartan spear, then another. You pivot, jab, brace. The man beside you slips briefly on a bloody patch of earth. But he recovers before you can even curse. Within minutes, the first wave is broken. They retreat in confusion, carrying their wounded, stepping over their dead. You don't chase. Spartans don't chase. That's when mistakes happen. You hold your ground, one giant bronze wall with 1,000 scars. The second wave comes quickly. More aggressive. You feel the heat rising off their bodies, the stink of fear, the weight of their momentum. But again, your formation holds. The narrow pass works in your favor. They can't surround you. They can only come in narrow lines, and that makes them manageable. One man tries to leap over the shield wall. You introduce him to your sword. Briefly, you don't remember his face. You barely remember the sound he made. You just remember the sting in your arm from the angle of the blow. You're bleeding. Not much, but enough to make your grip slippery. You wipe your hand on your cloak and refocus. The sun rises higher. The stink intensifies sweat, blood, fear, and something metallic. You're not sure if it's the taste of bronze or the taste of inevitability. By mid-afternoon, the field is covered in bodies. Some Persians, a few Greeks, mostly Persians. You stand over them, aching, sore, alive. You rest in short shifts. Water is passed in skins. Food is barely touched. Your hands tremble, not from fear, but fatigue. Still, you remain standing. Xerxes tries again. This time, he sends in the immortals. They march slowly, deliberately, like they've heard the stories and aren't impressed. Their uniforms are neat, their expressions hidden behind cloth masks. They look like professional killers. And they are. But so are you. The impact is heavier this time. Their training matches yours nearly. Their coordination is tighter nearly. But there's one thing they lack: desperation. You're not just fighting to win. You're fighting because there's no retreat, no reinforcements, no tomorrow. Your phalanx flexes, strains. One man is wounded, and pulled back another steps forward. The line doesn't break. You land a blow to the thigh of a masked immortal. He stumbles. Another Spartan finishes the job. You feel a rush not of joy, not of triumph, just grim satisfaction. They fall back. It's day 1. You've held. The Persians retreat stunned. Xerxes, somewhere in his massive gold-plated tent, is fuming. You imagine him throwing something ornate and expensive at a servant. The image makes you smile despite the ache in your legs. That night, you sleep under the stars again. No bedrolls, no fire, just the familiar scent of sweat blood and hot springs. Someone hums a marching tune. Leonidas walks among the men. No speech, just a quiet look, a hand on a shoulder, a brief nod. That's his version of leadership. And somehow it's more reassuring than 1,000 shouted orders. You wonder what tomorrow will bring, but not for long. Sleep finds you quickly, and for now you dream of shade. Dawn doesn't so much rise as it limps in, behind a haze of campfire smoke and damp mist. You awaken with the stiffness of a statue and the breath of someone who slept in their armor because you have. Your shoulders feel like stone. Your legs hum with soreness, and your back makes a noise that probably concerns the gods. No one speaks, not out of fear, just out of understanding. The silence is its own kind of conversation now. You chew on a fig still half asleep as the morning fog lifts and reveals the sea to your right, calm as glass. On the cliffs to your left, shadows flicker owls heading home, or perhaps something more sinister. You choose not to investigate. Today, you'll be busy. You're already moving when the horns sound. The Persians are coming again. You recognize the pattern infantry first light and quick like kindling before the logs. You and your shieldmates form up shields, locked spears, angled knees bent. The first impact is jarring, but familiar. Like a rude handshake from someone wearing knives. They come hard, fast, noisy. They shout in languages you don't understand and swing weapons shaped like crescent moons, meat cleavers, fishing hooks. None of it matters. You're not here to admire exotic blades. You jab, pivot, bash. When your spear breaks, you draw your short sword, which is about the size of a ruler and twice as angry. It was forged for this close-quarters, elbow-to-elbow chaos, the kind of fighting where there's no time to think, only react. A man screams beside you. He's not dead, just tired. You grunt, shove him behind you, and step forward to fill the space. The line holds. Again, and again, and again. Xerxes, you suspect, is starting to get annoyed. Maybe even offended. You imagine him asking, "What do you mean they're still standing while drinking something expensive out of a goblet made from a cursed fish?" By midday, the dead carpet the pass. Horses lie twisted in unnatural shapes. Arrows jut from the rock like bristles. Flies arrive. Always on time, those flies. The Persians regroup. You watch them mutter gesture shuffle like actors between scenes. This is no longer a display of might. It's a test of will. How many lives can Xerxes afford to lose before his pride cracks? And more importantly, how long can your legs hold out? You breathe deeply. In through the nose, out through the teeth. The salt air is sharp. It wakes you more than sleep ever could. One of the younger Spartans starts to giggle, not hysterically, just a light, strange chuckle. "I think I killed the same guy twice," he mutters. No one corrects him. Maybe he did. Historians still argue whether Xerxes' waves were tactically flawed, or if he simply underestimated Greek terrain. But here on the ground, it feels personal. Like he's throwing everything he has just to prove the universe still listens to him. And yet, nothing breaks. Your side sees some losses. One man slips and gets trampled in the retreat. Another catches a spear beneath the ribs. No screams, just gritted teeth and the metallic smell of endings. Leonidas stands among you unshaken. His armor is scratched, his cloak streaked with dust and blood. but his eyes still calm. He looks not like a king, but like a farmer watching the skies predicting storms. That night the camp is quieter. Not sad, just heavier. You eat in silence. You sharpen your spear. You watch the stars and wonder idly if anyone back in Sparta is dreaming of you. Probably not. Spartans don't waste dreams. The Thebans and Thespians, your allies, sit close to their own fires. They're not as seasoned. One man offers you a hunk of bread. You take it. It's stale dry and somehow perfect. Sharing it feels like shaking hands with mortality. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. You sleep, but only just. Every creak of a branch feels like the tread of Persian boots. And then comes day 3. It begins with a whisper. A shepherd, wide-eyed and sweating, stumbles into camp before dawn. He's Greek. His tunic is torn, and his story is worse. He speaks of betrayal, of a local named Ephialtes, traitor, opportunist, coward, who led the Persians to a secret path. A goat trail over the mountain, around your position, to your back. Leonidas listens without reaction. You imagine something breaking inside him, but outwardly, he simply nods, gives the man water, then turns and calls for his captains. You don't need to hear the orders. You already know. The pass is no longer defensible. By midday, the Persian flanking force will be behind you. There's still time to retreat, to flee, to regroup, but that's not the plan. Leonidas stands before the assembled Greeks. His voice is quiet but certain. He tells the non-Spartan contingents they may go, that their cities need them, that this isn't their fight to finish. Some do leave, understandably. They're not cowards, they're just rational. But others remain, 700 Thespians among them. Volunteers, artists, craftsmen, poets, farmers, staying not because of discipline but devotion. You tighten your grip on your spear, not in defiance, in acceptance. This is it. You're not here to win. You're here to delay, to write a page of history in blood and bronze. That night the fires are brighter. The wine is passed more freely. Someone even sings a low rasping ballad about a shepherd who loved a star. You don't know all the words, but you hum along. One man sharpens his blade, then sharpens it again. Another mends his broken sandal with a strip of leather from a fallen enemy's pouch. Leonidas walks among you once more, his face unreadable. Then finally he speaks, not a speech, just a sentence. Eat well, men, for tonight we dine in Hades. It's almost funny. So dramatic, it's cliché. And yet, no one laughs, because it's true. You fall asleep that night with your sword across your chest, your helmet beside your head, and your heartbeat counting down. The morning of the final stand arrives slowly, as if the sun itself is reluctant to rise. You wake before it does, stirred by the hush in the air. It's not fear, not quite. It's a kind of reverent stillness, like the earth is holding its breath. Even the birds seem to wait. You sit up, adjust your cuirass, and stretch your aching limbs. Every joint creaks. Your muscles protest like old dogs, weary and loyal. You tie your sandals with fingers that shake more from exhaustion than nerves. Around you others stir. Not all. Some are already standing silent silhouettes against the gray horizon. A few sit with heads bowed, not praying but thinking. Probably remembering family, lovers, unfinished things. Or perhaps they're just contemplating how deeply uncomfortable tree roots are as pillows. The Thespians are still here, wide-eyed but resolute. No one mocks them now. They've earned their place. You nod to one who meets your gaze. He nods back. That's enough. Then comes the sound. Not shouts, not drums, just feet. From the ridge above, the flanking Persian force emerges. Columns of them, pouring like ants, down a hill of spilled honey. Spears in glinting rows, arrows in bundles. Flags fluttering with gold-threaded arrogance. They've come around behind you, exactly as expected, but still seeing it makes your stomach turn. You glance at Leonidas. He's watching the approach with the calm of a man who's already made peace with every god worth negotiating with. No fury, no panic, just a slow exhale. You turn back to the pass. Because the front hasn't quieted either, Xerxes has timed it perfectly. A full frontal assault. Immortals, archers, cavalry, everyone he can throw. He wants this finished, clean, spectacular. He's not just trying to win, he's trying to erase you. So you form up again, one last time. This time the phalanx is tighter. You stand shoulder to shoulder not just with Spartans, but with Thespians, Thebans, and even a few free Greeks who refuse to retreat. It's no longer about city or rank. It's about time, and making sure Xerxes pays dearly for every heartbeat of it. The first wave hits harder than before. You brace behind your shield. Feel the thud of bodies, the scream of metal on bronze. You lunge, strike, fall back. Your arms are numb. Your feet slip on blood-slick rock. You're fighting not with strength, but with rhythm. One motion feeding the next, one breath chasing the last. Behind you, arrows begin to fall, not in volleys floods, blackening the sky. You don't look up. You don't have time. You just keep moving, keep stabbing, keep living one heartbeat at a time. The man beside you, someone you fought with for 2 days, takes an arrow through the neck. He doesn't cry out, just drops. You step over him. You can cry later, or not. Some say Leonidas was killed by a volley of arrows. Others claim he fought until he was surrounded, cutting down foes until he was finally overwhelmed. Historians still argue whether he died early in the assault or made it all the way to the final charge. But you see it happen. Leonidas is ahead of you, sword in hand, eyes burning. He's a lion at the end of the world. He roars not in anger, but in welcome, as if death were just another worthy opponent. Then he's gone, felled by spears, arrows, blades. You can't even tell which. Your throat tightens, but there's no time to mourn. You fall back to a tighter knot of survivors. Fewer now. Perhaps 100. Maybe less. You can't count anymore. Everything blurs into smoke and screaming. Then comes the final fallback. To the hillock. The small mound of earth behind the pass where the last stand takes place. You stagger up the slope shield, dragging legs trembling. Others are already there, forming a ring backs to each other. Some don't even have swords anymore, just daggers, rocks, even fists. No one runs. The Persians encircle. You hold the line. For minutes, maybe hours. It's hard to tell. Time has melted. Your shield is gone, splintered. Your helmet is cracked. Your vision blurs. You feel a sharp pain in your thigh arrow blade. You don't know. You keep swinging, keep standing. Beside you, a Thespian collapses. You take his place without thinking. Then the archers line up. And you know what's coming. The sky darkens again. Arrows fall. You raise your arm out of instinct, not hope. The world goes black and quiet, but not empty. Because you know something else. Your stand bought time. Your death, meaningless as it feels in the moment, meant something. The Greeks will remember. Others will follow. And someday far away, someone will tell this story by firelight. With jokes and sighs and maybe a glass of wine. They'll speak of Spartans and Thespians and kings. They'll speak of a pass called Thermopylae. And your name. It won't be written, but it will be felt in the silence between words. And yet, you wake, sort of. There's no sound at first. Just a pressure in your ears, as though the world has ducked under water. You try to lift your arm, but it doesn't move. You're still. Entirely. Even blinking feels like a memory. But sensations begin to return. Not pain, at least not yet, but a kind of awareness. Cold earth beneath you, the scent of blood, sweat, and ash. Something tickles your cheek. A beetle, maybe? Or a falling ash. You open your eyes. It's twilight. The sky's gone purple, smeared with smoke. The Persians have moved on. Or maybe they're still nearby looting, piling the dead like firewood. You can't tell. You're not sure if you care. You roll to one side. The pain arrives. All at once. Like a missed appointment that suddenly remembers to show up. Your leg is numb. Your ribs ache with each breath. Your fingers are slick with something warm and sticky. You don't look. Instead, you lift your head. Around you are bodies, your comrades, your enemies, all the same now. Some lie in twisted heaps. Others still clinging to weapons, eyes open to the fading light. You whisper a name. Yours? Someone else's, it barely escapes your lips. No one answers. Eventually you sit up. The world spins and you brace yourself against the earth. You feel a gash above your eyebrow crusted over. Something drips into your eye. Salt, blood, both. You're not dead, but you should be. Leonidas is gone. So are the other Spartans you knew. The Thebans who stayed, the Thespians who refused to leave. They're part of the hill now. That sacred slope where the last stand took root and grew into legend. Historians still argue whether any Spartans survived the battle. Some say one or two returned as messengers cursed with shame and silence. Others believe that every single Spartan perished as intended. But here you are somewhere between memory and myth. You don't know what to do, so you crawl, away from the bodies, away from the stink, toward a ridge where the wind still moves and the rocks are warm from the day's last sun. You don't expect to survive the night. You're too weak to run, too tired to hide. But something inside you, the same stubborn core that held the line when spears shattered and the sky blackened, won't let go. You press your back to the stone and stare out over the plain. It's strangely beautiful. The sun touches the sea in slow motion, gilding the water. For a second, it doesn't feel like a battlefield. It feels like home. Then you hear them. The footsteps. Not many, just a few. Maybe scouts, maybe looters. You lie flat, trying not to breathe. They pass close. Voices murmur in Persian. You catch one word repeated, Leonidas. Even the enemy whispers it like a spell. They don't see you. Or maybe they do, and they spare you. A broken soldier in the rubble isn't worth a blade. Once they vanish, you sit up again. Your fingers tremble as you reach for your pouch. Inside, miracle of miracles, is a crust of bread. Hard as a rock. You chew anyway. It tastes like stone and victory. Somewhere beyond these hills, Greek cities stir. They'll hear of your stand, of the king who would not kneel, of the 300 who dared to defy an empire. Word will spread like wildfire. You won't be part of that story, not by name, but the silence you earned, that will echo for generations. You lie back, letting the stars blink awake above you. Your wounds throb, your stomach turns. But you are alive, for now. The next hours are a blur, half sleep, half delirium. You see faces in the stars. Your mother, your childhood friend. Leonidas nodding once approval in his eyes. You feel sand beneath your back and phantom hands guiding you to stand, to walk, to keep moving. At dawn you rise, somehow, limping, bleeding, but upright. You walk inland, away from the sea, away from Thermopylae, toward what? Not safety, not glory, just a future. You pass a shepherd hours later. He stares. You don't speak, just nod. He nods back. It's enough. That evening, you reach a small grove of olive trees. You collapse beneath them. Your body finally gives out. You wake to birdsong. The breeze carries scents that aren't death. Figs. Dust. Something alive. Someone finds you a farmer, probably. He doesn't ask questions, just gives you water and wraps your leg with clean linen. You sleep again. When you next wake, your story is already changing. People have heard of the stand, heard of the defiance, heard of Leonidas and the 300. You say nothing, not because you're afraid, because there's nothing to add. They already know what matters. In time, you heal. The limp never leaves, but neither does the memory. You become a quiet man. You speak little. You keep to your work. But every now and then, you find yourself staring west, toward the sea, toward the pass, toward a time when the world stood still and 300 men taught a god king what mortals are made of. And sometimes on stormy nights when thunder rumbles, you swear you hear the horns again, calling you back. Years pass. The scar on your leg fades to a white line like a forgotten road on an old map. But the memory of that narrow pass never leaves. Not in the way you limped for months, not in the way your ears prick at the sound of marching boots. Even now, you live quietly, in a village too small to have a name on most maps, near fields of wheat and olive groves that sing when the wind is just right. People know you only as the quiet one. They don't ask much, and you don't offer, until one day a child, cheeks smudged with dust eyes, too big for his head, asks the question you've silently waited for all your life. Did you fight with the 300? You don't answer right away. Just look at him. His eyes sparkle with the kind of wonder you remember having once. Before blood, before arrows, before the hill. You nod. That's all. He gasps like you've revealed you're a titan in disguise. From then on, you become a shadowed legend in your own little world. People begin leaving extra bread at your door. They bow slightly when you pass, not in reverence, but respect. And every so often, someone brings a stranger, a traveler, a scholar, a soldier. Always the same question. Is it true? And every time you shrug, smile, say only the gods remember clearly, which is in its own way a kind of truth. The Persian War doesn't end with Thermopylae. You hear the whispers, the stories, the sea battle at Salamis where wooden ships became hammers of fate, the stand at Plataea where Greek hoplites, Spartan, Athenian, Theban fought like wildfire. You hear that Xerxes returned to Persia humiliated but still regal, that Mardonius stayed behind and died on Greek soil. Historians still argue whether Xerxes' retreat was strategic or born of fear. But one thing is clear. His myth of invincibility died in that narrow pass. And the world took note. You never returned to Sparta. There's no place for survivors and stories about heroic sacrifice. The 300 are now immortal in death. And you're still mortal, still breathing, still bleeding, just more quietly. Sparta never punishes you, nor do they welcome you. You're forgotten officially, which ironically is its own form of mercy. One day, years later, a group of young men arrives at your village. Clean armor, polished helms, the red cloaks of Sparta, bright and sharp. Their commander, a man barely older than the boy who once asked you about the stand, offers you a scroll. You don't open it. You know what it says. You thank him anyway. As they leave, one turns back and salutes. You don't return the gesture, but you smile. In the evenings, you sit by the fire and whittle. Not weapons, those days are long gone. You carve animals, birds. A lion once, which you give to the child who asked about the battle years ago. He's grown now, married, expecting his own son. And one night, unasked, you speak. You tell him about the first day in the pass, the way the wind carried the smell of salt and pine, the awkward silence before the first arrow flew. the dry taste of fear behind your tongue. He listens, says nothing, which is perfect, because that's what the story needs. Silence, not fanfare, not fireworks, just the soft hum of memory flickering like the fire beside you. And maybe a joke or two about the snoring, about the stink, about how one Spartan forgot his sandals and blamed it on divine will. When you laugh, it's soft, but real. You remember Leonidas, the soldier who said that fighting in the shade would be fun, when told the Persian arrows would blot out the sun. You remember the man who carried 2 spears at all times and always managed to trip over his own shield. These men weren't statues. They were sweaty, stubborn, occasionally idiotic, and brilliant, and gone. But they still live in your laugh, in your limp, in your refusal to glorify war, but also your refusal to forget it. And when you walk the fields, you sometimes recite their names, not loudly, just under your breath, so they stay close. One season, a traveling poet comes to your village. He's wiry, sunburnt, with ink-stained fingers, and the kind of voice that sounds like it's been drinking wine since infancy. He asks if he can stay a few days. You let him. One night, he sits beside you and asks if you've ever heard of Thermopylae. You nod. He begins reciting a verse he's working on, something about bravery, duty, sacrifice. It's good, a little too flowery, but the bones are strong. You offer a correction, then another. Eventually, you rewrite half of it while pretending not to care. When he leaves, he thanks you. And a year later, someone brings a worn scroll through town. It's the finished version. You read it once, slowly, and you realize something odd. You're in it, not by name, but in gesture, in silence, in the shadow between Leonidas's roar and Xerxes's command. You exist there now, woven in rhythm and meter, bound to parchment, drifting toward time. You fold the scroll and return to your fire. The stars wheel above you, indifferent and eternal. But for once you don't mind, because you were there and someone remembered. You wake up one morning to birdsong and the scent of baking bread, the same as yesterday and the day before. Life has become simple, rhythmic, almost musical in its repetition. You rise, you stretch. Your joints protest, but they still move. You sip from a cracked clay cup, the rim worn smooth by time and habit. And for once, your mind doesn't rush to Thermopylae. But the world does not stay quiet for long. A messenger arrives, dusty, breathless, looking like he sprinted across the spine of the Peloponnese. He's not here for you, not directly, but word travels fast in small places. Persia, he says, is stirring again. You feel it like a stone dropped into a still pool. Not fear, not even anger, just awareness. You nod quietly and return to your stool beneath the olive tree. It's not your war anymore, but your memory is part of its soil now. A few days later, the child who once asked you about the 300 returns, now a man with a son of his own, barely tall enough to hold a wooden sword. He asks if you'll teach the boy how to fight. You don't answer immediately. Instead, you ask why. He says nothing for a while, then finally, so he doesn't have to be afraid. That's the right answer. So you teach, not just about the thrust and parry, not just about balance and breathing, but about what fear really is. How it isn't something to conquer, but something to know, something to walk beside. How bravery isn't loud. Often, it's just showing up again the next day, even when you're tired, limping, and the odds make no sense. You teach the boy to stand, to watch the horizon, to respect silence. And sometimes, when the wind is right, you both listen. For the horns, for the footsteps, for the ghosts you still carry. He never asks for stories. He just watches how you move, how you listen, how you pause before you speak. That's more than enough. You grow old. Slowly, honestly, you begin to forget some details. Which foot you placed forward first when the phalanx locked shields. The exact sound of Leonidas's voice when he barked your name. the smell of the pass at dusk. Though part of you swears you can still catch it in dreams in the olive grove or when thunder threatens from the east. But some memories never fade, like the feel of the spear in your hand, the way your knuckles locked as the tide of men pressed forward, the strange calm that came just before it all began. And one day while mending a fence, you find yourself humming a tune. You don't know where it came from until you realize it's the marching cadence from Sparta, a rhythm set to steps designed to unite hearts into one pulse. You stop and smile. Funny how it's still there. Later that summer, a group of traveling scholars passes through your village. They're Greek, but not from anywhere familiar. They ask if anyone knows the old tale of the 300, not the official one, but the kind that doesn't make it onto marble plaques. People point to you. You greet them with the weathered patience of someone who's been asked more questions than he has answers left. But you agree to talk. That night around a fire, they listen. You don't embellish. You don't dramatize. You speak plainly about the mud, the hunger, the laughter, the absurdity, the man who lost his sandals and tried to claim divine favor, the sound of arrows in the sky. You tell them about the men who stood next to you. Not heroes, just farmers, wrestlers, hunters, poets, trying to hold a line against the impossible. And when you finish, one of the scholars, barely more than a boy with ink stains on his palms and too much awe in his eyes, asks, "Were you afraid?" You lean forward, poke at the fire with a stick and say, "Of course. Only fools aren't." And then more softly, "But we stood anyway." The next morning they leave, and one of them presses a tiny clay tablet into your hand. Before they go, it has a single etched word, mnimi, memory. You tuck it into your pouch. Not long after the seasons begin to blur, your walks become slower. The fields feel wider. The path to the stream stretches like a song that forgets how to end. But the grove remains your sanctuary. There beneath the branches, you sit most days. You watch the wind stir the leaves. You feel the quiet. One evening you look west. The sun is low, gold spilling across the hills. You think about the pass, not the blood, not the screams, but the moment before, when everything was still. And Leonidas turned to you, just you, and smiled. He didn't need words. That look said everything. We are not here to win. We are here to mean something. And somehow, you did. You close your eyes, and for a moment you're back there, standing in formation, shoulder to shoulder, ready, still. The nights are growing longer now. You feel it in your bones, in the quiet ache that greets you each morning, in the stillness of the village as the last leaves fall from the trees. Winter, slow and certain, is wrapping itself around the land, and you, wrapped in your cloak, find warmth not in fire but in memory. You've become part of the rhythm here. The way the well creaks when the bucket drops, the way the olive trees sigh in the wind. The children call you Papo's grandfather, though none of them carry your blood. But all of them carry your stories now. You watch one of them, little Nico's hair, wild as a goat's, run through the grove swinging a stick like a spear. His shout echoes through the trees, loud and full of triumph. "For Sparta," he cries. You chuckle softly. Careful, you call after him. The tree always wins. He runs straight into the trunk anyway. You wince at the thud, but smile when he bounces up, more determined than ever. Braver, you think, looks very different when you're 5. Later, he sits beside you, rubbing his forehead and asking, "Was it scary, Papos?" You nod. Terrifying. But you didn't run away. You look down at his earnest little face, eyes as wide as shields. "I wanted to," you admit, but someone had to stand. One. You exhale slow and long, as though releasing something you've carried too long. Because if we didn't, who would? He doesn't fully understand. But that's all right. He will. One day. The seasons shift again. You find yourself indoors more. The cold lingers in your knees, settles in your spine. But your mind wanders further than ever. Back to that hill again and again. Historians still argue whether Thermopylae changed anything. Whether 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies really made a difference in the great sweep of empire and time. You know the answer. It changed everything. Not because it stopped Persia, but because it showed the world what a single stand could mean. A line drawn in dirt. A promise sealed in blood. You remember when the Persians first came into view, ranks like ocean waves, banners flapping like wings. You remember how one of the younger soldiers vomited behind a rock. And you remember Leonidas simply placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Fear means you understand the stakes, he told him. Now use it. That boy fought like a lion the next day. Died with an arrow through his throat. Never even cried out. You think of him often. His name is gone now, blown away like dust. But not to you. You whisper it sometimes when you wake from dreams too vivid. Names matter. One morning the villagers bring you a gift. A cloak finely woven, dyed deep crimson. Not quite Spartan red, but close enough to bring tears to your eyes. They don't say anything when they hand it to you. Just nod. You wear it every day after that. Not out of pride, but remembrance. Your days slow further. The olive tree where you used to sit is now tended by others. They bring you its branches, freshly trimmed, shaped into little carvings. You've taught them well, and still you listen to the stories. Athenian travelers speak of new wars, new alliances. Rome is rising to the west like a lion yawning from sleep. The old powers shift, reshape. Even Persia changes. Kings come and go. Cities burn. Others rise from their ashes. But Thermopylae remains. A word, a whisper, a symbol. You hear someone recite a new poem, one you hadn't heard before. Tell them in Sparta passerby. You stop him there. You know the rest. You close your eyes and finish the line silently. That here obedient to their laws we lie. A good line, true in its own way. But the truth you carry is deeper. You remember how obedience had very little to do with it in the end. You stood not because of law, but because of loyalty to each other, to something larger than fear, to the idea that some things just a few are worth standing for, even when there's no hope of winning. Especially then, one evening, as the sun sets in a wash of bronze and rose, you sit by the hearth with the boy who once swung a stick at the olive tree. He's older now, stronger, wiser. You hand him something wrapped in cloth. He unwraps it slowly. It's your old bronze helmet, dented, faded, still whole. His hands tremble slightly as he lifts it. I can't, you say, but I didn't fight. Not yet, you say. But someday something will ask you to stand. You pause. Let the fire crackle. And when it does remember who you are, he nods. Not in understanding, but acceptance. That's enough. That night you sleep deeply. And in your dream, you are young again. You stand on the pass. The cliffs rise on either side. The sea below roars in time with your heartbeat. And beside you, Leonidas, silent and steady, a half smile at the corner of his mouth. He doesn't speak. He just claps a hand on your shoulder. You don't need words. You've carried his meaning all your life. The days grow shorter now, time curling inward like the pages of a scroll left too near the fire. You move more slowly, not because of weakness, but because there's less to rush toward. You've done your part. Your story has mostly been told, but you begin to notice something curious. People treat you differently. Not just with reverence, though. That's there too, but with a kind of quiet awe. They speak in softer tones when you enter a room. They pause when you start to speak, even if you're only asking about the weather. You've become a living relic, a thread still dangling from a tapestry woven long ago. You suppose this is what it feels like to be history. One morning, as the sun struggles to rise through a veil of fog, you find yourself drawn to the edge of the village. There, overlooking a quiet stretch of sea, stands a new stone marker. Simple, unadorned, but at its base, someone has etched a single word, Thermopylae. You chuckle. Not because it's wrong, but because it's always strange seeing the past chiseled into permanence. That narrow pass was never meant to become legend. It was muddy, cramped, smelled of blood and seaweed. You remember slipping on the rocks, shouting at someone to tighten the shield wall, the sting of brine in your eyes. That's the real Thermopylae. But now it's become something else. People speak of it like it was a dream, a myth, a place where men turned into gods and death was just another form of glory. You shake your head gently. It wasn't glory. It was grit, blisters, sweat, terror, brotherhood, and a long, slow walk into a battle you knew you wouldn't return from. You sit by the marker and run your fingers across the letters. A boy approaches one of the newer ones in the village, too young to know much yet, but old enough to wonder. Did you really fight there? He asks. You nod. He hesitates. What was it like? You lean back, gaze at the horizon. Loud, you say at first. Hot? Cramped. Then and quiet. He frowns. Quiet. You smile. The kind of quiet you only hear when you stop being afraid. He doesn't understand, not fully. But he nods anyway, trying to memorize your words like a spell. You watch him run off swordstick clutched in his hand, charging at imagined Persians hiding behind a fig tree. His laughter echoes, and you marvel at the way children always bring balance. They remind you that life goes on, that history is never really past. It's just patiently waiting to be remembered again. That evening around the fire, the older villagers ask you for one last tale, just one more. You close your eyes and let yourself drift not to the battle, but to the night before. You remember the smell of roasted barley, the soft murmur of men polishing weapons, not because it would help, but because they needed something to do with their hands. Leonidas had spoken then, not loudly, not as a king, but as a man among other men. He'd said, tomorrow we remind the world that we were here. Nothing more. No speeches, no pomp. Just that. You tell the villagers this, and they grow silent. Someone throws another log on the fire, and it cracks loudly, startling a dog who growls before settling back down. And then you add, we were there to hold the line. And sometimes holding the line is the bravest thing anyone can do. A few people nod. A few others wipe at their eyes. It's not sadness. It's recognition. The kind that grows in the soul when truth finally settles. Later, when the fire has burned low and the stars come out in thick clusters, you return to your small home. The walls are lined with memories, an old spear, dull now leaning in the corner. A worn red cloak. A pile of stories etched in your own hand, tucked away in a wooden chest. No one told you to write them, but you did anyway. Just in case someone someday wants more than monuments and marble. Wants the smell, the sweat, the crack in a shield where the light got in. You lie down, blanket tucked beneath your chin, and listen to the wind press against the shutters. You dream. This time the dream is not of Thermopylae. It is of a field of flowers, wild ones, growing in disorganized joy across a sunlit meadow. You walk barefoot among them, and the sky is wide and laughing. In the distance, someone is singing an old marching song. You hum along, and as you bend to pick a flower, a voice behind you says, you were late. You turn. Leonidas grins. Took you long enough. You grin back. Had to teach some kids how to hold a spear first. He nods. Good. They'll need it. You stand together for a while in the field, watching as more men arrive, all familiar, all smiling. You remember their names, all of them, everyone. The dream fades gently, like the last notes of a lullaby sung in a mother's voice. And as you drift deeper, something inside you knows the line is still being held. and you helped draw it. Morning arrives gently now, slipping through the cracks in your shutter like a whisper rather than a command. No clatter of bronze, no trumpet's call, no barked orders in the chill of a Spartan dawn. Just bird song and the soft creak of old wood. You stretch slowly and sit by the hearth. The fire has long since died, but the embers are still warm. You poke at them with a stick, watching them glow, and remember another morning long ago when the sky turned red, not with sunrise, but with flame and ash. The Persians had come at dawn. They liked to attack when men were still heavy with sleep minds, muddled by dreams and dew. But Leonidas expected it. You all did. There was no more guessing by then, just counting down. That final day at Thermopylae wasn't a battle. It was a holding action, a refusal, a living blockade of muscle and will. And strangely, despite the blood and the certainty of death, it had clarity. You remember that well. Clarity has a flavor, clean bitter like cold metal on the tongue. When the arrows darkened the sky, someone muttered, "Then we shall fight in the shade." A joke, sure, but more than that, a declaration. That was the Spartan way, turned fear into rhythm, into poetry, into something you could shout before swinging your sword. That final stand was a blur. You remember flailing, screaming, falling, rising, the heat, the smell, the way time stretched and collapsed like the folds of a dying sail. You remember Leonidas falling not like a god, but like a man, heavy, spent, peaceful, and the silence that followed was louder than anything that came before. Back in the present, you watched the village wake, the baker's son barefoot in the dust, a woman hauling water, a dog chasing chickens in lazy circles. Life, ordinary and sacred. You step outside, wrap the cloak tighter around your shoulders, and walk. Your legs aren't what they were, but they still remember how to move with purpose. Down by the sea, fishermen pull in their nets. They nod at you. You nod back. There's no need to speak. They've heard your stories. Some don't believe them, others believe too much. It doesn't matter. The truth is, they're somewhere between your wrinkles and the way you still scan the horizon. Just in case. You sit on your favorite rock. It's flat, sun-warmed, and smells faintly of salt. You think about Leonidas, not the statue they'll one day carve, but the man who used to mutter to himself when sharpening his blade, who laughed so hard at your joke about Persian shoes that he snorted goat's milk through his nose, who had a scar shaped like a crescent moon on his right thigh and always swore it came from a jealous rooster. Historians still argue whether Leonidas led the Spartans to a glorious sacrifice or simply delayed the inevitable. You remember the truth. He didn't seek death. He sought meaning. There's a difference. You trace your fingers across a stone. The grooves remind you of the path's narrow twisting, full of places to trip and hide. That was the genius of the defense after all. Geography fought beside you. The cliffs and rocks and sea, they were your brothers too. Silent ones. You exhale, the sea answers. Later that day, a traveler arrives, dusty, loud, full of tales about distant lands. Rome, he says, is growing powerful. They speak of order and roads and legions, but also of conquest, of new kings replacing old gods. You smile politely. You've heard it before. Every empire starts with roads and ends with regrets. The traveler stays the night. At dinner, someone nudges you. They want you to tell your story. Again, you begin reluctantly, then more confidently. But this time you tell a different part. You speak not of the final day, but of the days before. The training, the quiet glances, the small acts of kindness between men who knew they'd die together. The way Leonidas handed you the last piece of dried fig from his rations, with a wink saying, "I hate figs anyway." The laughter around the fire, the silence in the dark, The traveler listens with wide eyes. He asks questions. Too many. How many Persians were there? Do you think Xerxes was scared? Why didn't you retreat? You shrug. We didn't count them. We weren't there to win. We were there to hold. He doesn't fully understand. But maybe someday he will. Before he leaves, he asks if you have any advice. You pause. Don't chase death, you say. Chase worth. It doesn't sound profound, but it's the best you've got. That night, as you lay in bed, you hear thunder far off, just a rumble. You smile. You used to fear storms. Now they're just reminders that the world is still turning, that somewhere a boy is still standing tall in a narrow pass, that the line, however faint, still holds. You wake with the dawn, not because you must, but because the habit is too deep. Spartan discipline is a stubborn house guest, and it never really leaves. Even now, with your bones stiff and your beard gone mostly silver, you still wake before the sun. The morning is cool, and the sky a soft gray, the kind of sky that makes you think something is waiting just behind it. You rise, stretch slowly, and set about your usual ritual. A splash of water from the basin, a quick check on the clay jar where you store dried figs, and a long moment just standing at the doorway, listening. It's quiet, but not empty. You dress slowly and head out, walking the familiar path toward the edge of the village. Your walking stick taps against the ground in a rhythm only you understand. Step, tap. Step, tap. It's a heartbeat. A march. You pass the olive grove and nod at the trees. They've outlived kings and earthquakes. Olive trees don't need to hurry. They just stay. By the small stream, two children are building a dam from stones and sticks. They argue, of course, some tactical dispute over water flow and pebble alignment. You watch them a moment unseen. One of them raises a tiny wooden sword and declares, "I am Leonidas. You can't cross." The other responds, "Fine, I'm the river god, and I flood your camp." Chaos ensues. You laugh softly. They are too young to understand how close to truth they've landed. The Battle of Thermopylae wasn't just men against men. It was nature, will, and chance rolled into a single dusty moment. The river tried to help. The rocks did their part. Even the wind that carried your war cries down the pass became a sort of ally. You sit on your stone, the same one from yesterday, and pull from your cloak a small polished object, your last piece of armor. Not a breastplate or a helm, no. Just a bronze cuff from your wrist guard, now dull and dented, shaped more by time than war. You turn it in your hand. It once deflected an arrow. You remember that moment barely. The shock, the sting, the odd ringing noise it made as it glanced off and whirled into the dust. Funny how something meant for death became a token of survival. Historians still debate whether the Spartans believed they would truly die at Thermopylae, someone once told you. You do not join the debate. You remember, you believed in Leonidas. That was enough. That evening, the village holds a small gathering. It's nothing formal, just food, music, and talk. You sit near the fire, wrapped in your red cloak, faded, threadbare, still unmistakably Spartan. A girl asks to braid your hair. You chuckle and lean forward. Her fingers are clumsy but gentle. When she's done, she proudly declares, "You look like a real warrior." You thank her and don't correct her. Across the fire, an old friend leans close. "You should write it down," he says. All of it. The whole battle. So it doesn't fade. You nod. But you already have. In your mind, in your scars, in the way you still scan the crowd for weaknesses in formation, even when you're just watching a wedding procession. Your story is stitched into every move you make, every silence you hold. But yes, perhaps it should be written too. For the children, for the dreamers. That night, in the dim quiet of your home, you begin to write. You don't start with the battle. You start with a pair of sandals, Yours too small now to fit once belonged to your brother. He died before he could fight. Fever took him. You wore them anyway, even though they pinched just to carry him with you. You write that down. You write about the long runs through the mountains, about the sting of cold rain on bare shoulders, about the night Leonidas told you the plan, not because he had to, but because he trusted you. You write about how you sharpened your spear with more care than usual, knowing it would only need to hold for one more day. You write about the Persian messenger who arrived glittering with gold, offering bribes and promises. How you watched Leonidas listen, nod politely, and then say, "Come and take them." You write about the look on the messenger's face, and you laugh. Later you pause. Your hand aches. Your ink runs low. But the memories don't. So you keep going, because this is how legends survive, not through songs sung by bards who never smelled blood, but through quiet moments like this. One old man, one candle, and a memory stubborn enough to burn longer than empires. The wind shifts. You feel it through the shutters, and for a moment, it smells like the pass again, stone, sweat, seaweed, and smoke. Like the last breath before the charge. Like 1,000 men, all holding the same thought in their chests, waiting for the signal. You close your eyes. You are there. Again. Still. Always. The next morning arrives quietly as always, though your dream lingers long after the sun stretches over the hills. In it, the pass was silent again, untouched by time, the stone path as clean as the day it first broke through the cliffs. No Persians, no Spartans, just wind threading through the rocks like it owned the place. You take that as a sign. Today you return. It's not a pilgrimage, not exactly. You're not the type for dramatic homecomings or weepy speeches about honor. But there's a pull like a rope tied around your ribs, tugging you gently back to where everything became simple. Life before that moment, complicated, full of rules and questions. Life during that final stand, just one answer, one purpose. You pack light some dried figs, a water skin, and the old wrist cuff now tied to a length of leather like a charm. You wear your cloak, of course. It still smells faintly of smoke. Or maybe that's just your imagination. The road is longer than it used to be. Not physically, just in the way your knees now complain with every step. You lean heavier on your walking stick, pause more often to admire rocks and trees you used to ignore. But eventually, the cliffs come into view, just as you remembered. Thermopylae, the hot gates. They're quieter now. No clamor of spears, no crash of shields. Just a breeze rolling through tall grass and over broken stones. The monument modest, carved with names and phrases once whispered in firelight, still stands. You run your fingers across it. So many names. Some scratched so deep they still feel fresh. Others nearly lost to erosion like the stones forgotten what you all fought for. You sit beneath it and close your eyes. And you listen, not for voices or ghosts. Those don't visit you anymore. But for the quiet confirmation that you're not the only one who remembers. A bird lands nearby, cocking its head as if curious. You greet it with a nod. It doesn't fly away. Maybe that's your audience now. So you speak. You tell the pass what it meant. Not just the battle, the everything, the camaraderie, the silence before a charge. The way one man's back pressed against yours could feel like a fortress. The absurdity of laughing at someone's bad breath minutes before death. You tell it about Leonidas's last order, not shouted, but spoken calmly. Hold the line. And you did. For longer than anyone thought possible. You smile. Historians still debate whether the Persian delay at Thermopylae actually changed the course of the war. You say aloud for the bird, or maybe just the wind. Some say it gave the Greeks just enough time. Others say it was a noble waste. You shrug. Doesn't matter much now, does it? You stay until the sun starts to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. The cliffs turn golden, then burnished copper, then finally gray. You stand slowly and brush off your cloak. Before leaving, you do one last thing. You reach into your pack, take out the bronze wrist guard, and lay it gently on the base of the monument. It's not for show. It's not even for the others. It's for yourself. Because sometimes letting go isn't weakness. It's a kind of remembering. The walk back is slower, but lighter somehow. As if some part of the burden has stayed behind now. Held by the very stone that once shielded your back. You pass a traveler on the road who greets you politely, then eyes your red cloak. You a soldier, he asks? You smile. Was? He nods, unsure whether to press further, then lets it go. Back in the village, the night is warm. A festival is underway, nothing grand, just music and wine, the kind that draws neighbors into the square with torches and stringed instruments that always sound slightly out of tune. You sit near the edge and watch. Someone hands you a fig wrapped in honeyed dough. You take a bite and nearly weep. Not because it's delicious though it is, but because figs still exist. Honey still drips. Music still plays. And you still breathe. At one point, a boy approaches. I heard you were at the hot gates, he says, wide-eyed. Is it true? You pause. Yes. What was it like? You consider your answer. It was narrow, you say softly, but wide enough for heroes. He furrows his brow, trying to puzzle that out. You pat his shoulder. You'll understand someday. He runs off to rejoin his friends, wielding a stick, like a spear, yelling some version of your name. You chuckle. Later, as the stars come out and the music fades into gentle murmurs, you find your seat by the fire. Someone plays a soft melody on a lyre. The notes drift upward, mixing with the smoke and disappearing into the sky. You close your eyes, and in that moment, everything returns briefly. The clang of iron, the crush of bodies, Leonidas's calm, unshakable gaze, and finally, the peace that followed when the last Spartan fell, not with fear, but with pride, knowing that for 3 precious days, an empire had broken against a wall made not of stone, but of men. You sleep deeply that night as you haven't in years. Not because your body is free of aches, it isn't. Your joints still creak like a rusted gate, but something inside you has finally unclenched something wound-tight. Since that day at the hot gates, when everything changed, and yet, strangely, kept going, dawn breaks softly over the village. You stir, rising with the slow rhythm of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. Your feet touch the cool floor. You sit still a moment, letting the light creep over your shoulders, warming skin thinned by time. Breakfast is plain, a bit of bread, olive oil, and yesterday's figs. You chew slowly, like each bite is its own memory. Afterward, you wander, not far, just to the square where merchants are setting up their stalls and neighbors greet one another with sleepy nods. The baker's son waves. You wave back. Your presence, once a shadow of war, is now more like a tree that's always been there. Familiar. Reassuring. In the corner of the square, a storyteller begins speaking to a small crowd of children. She's young, maybe 20, with a steady voice and clever eyes. You settle onto a bench to listen out of curiosity. The brave King Leonidas, she begins, stood at the narrow pass of Thermopylae with just 300 Spartans. You smile. Here we go again. And they held back the Persian army for 3 whole days. The arrows fell so thick they blocked the sun. And do you know what the Spartans said? One child blurts out, "Then we shall fight in the shade." The group giggles, delighted. You close your eyes and let the moment wash over you. The words echo through time past, from lips that never saw the battlefield to ears that never will. Yet somehow the feeling remains. That's the strange magic of it. What was once a desperate dusty stand in a rocky pass has become a kind of lullaby, a bedtime story for brave children, a soft echo of steel wrapped in warmth and reverence. Historians still argue the storyteller adds whether Leonidas chose that pass knowing it was suicide or if he truly believed they could win. Your smile deepens. That old debate again. You've lived the answer. And it wasn't quite either or, perhaps it was both. That afternoon, you walk the ridge overlooking the river. The grass up here is high and golden, whispering against your ankles. From this height, the world feels soft and wide, not like a battlefield, but like a cradle. You sit. Your breathing slows. The world slows with you. You run a finger along the ridge of your walking stick. Someone carved the handle years ago, a lion stylized and proud. The mane curls back like a wave. It's worn now, but still fierce, like you. Maybe tomorrow you'll pass the stick to the boy who asked about Thermopylae. Or maybe the next day. There's still time, or perhaps not. As the sun begins its slow descent, you think again of your king, Leonidas. To the world, he's a symbol of bravery, of resistance, of martial glory. To you, he was a man, one who snored like a hog and had a laugh like broken pottery, one who carried the weight of his people on shoulders that ached just like yours. One who stood beside you not as a god, but as a brother. You think of him now and see not the statue, not the marble sternness of sculptors trying to freeze history, but the flesh and blood figure who clapped your shoulder before battle and said, "Don't forget to die well." You did not forget. You just took your time. And now, as the evening settles like a blanket over the hills, you make your way home. One last slow journey down the path, the lion-headed cane ticking a rhythm behind you. In your home, the fire crackles low. The cot is already turned down. You sit, letting the warmth settle over your knees. On the wall, a simple shield hangs its surface-dented edges, worn smooth. It hasn't seen battle in decades, but it still watches, still guards, and just as your eyes begin to close, wind stirs outside, not sharply, softly, like breath. The past remembers you, and always will. You lie back, sigh once, and let go.